when it comes to hip-hop, few names in the modern era are as celebrated as Kendrick Lamar. He's praised for his lyrical depth, storytelling skills, and influence on the culture. But not everyone is convinced he deserves the hype and comedian. Aries Spears is making sure his opinion is heard loud and clear. In a recent conversation, Spears didn't hold back, calling out what he sees as an overinflated reputation. His bold claim: Kendrick Lamar doesn't even deserve a spot in the top 20 of all time. It's a statement that has set the internet on fire. Fans are divided, some defending Kendrick's legacy as one of rap's most important voices, others agreeing with Spears that the industry has a tendency to crown artists too quickly. But Spears didn't stop there. He broke down his reasoning, comparing Kendrick's discography to legendary MCs from previous decades, and questioning whether his influence truly measures up to the greats. Is this just another case of an outspoken entertainer stirring the pot? Or does Spears have a valid point about the way hip-hop ranks its icons? One thing is certain: this debate has struck a nerve. Social media is buzzing with heated arguments, passionate defenses, and brutal takedowns from both sides. So, where do you stand? Is Kendrick Lamar a generational talent who deserves every bit of praise he gets? Or has the hip-hop world been too quick to place him among the legends? Aries Spears has thrown down the gauntlet, and the rap community is watching closely to see how Kendrick supporters respond. When it comes to the world of hip-hop, few names have captured as much attention, admiration, and critical analysis as Kendrick Lamar. From the very beginning of his career, he has been hailed as a lyrical prodigy, a poet of the streets, and an artist capable of blending deeply personal narratives with sweeping social commentary. His work has been dissected in classrooms, praised by music critics, and embraced by fans from all walks of life. Yet, despite the immense respect he commands, not everyone is convinced that Kendrick deserves the almost mythic status he has been granted in the hip-hop pantheon. Enter Aries Spears, a comedian and cultural commentator in his own right, who recently dropped a bombshell opinion that has stirred the waters of the rap community. Spears boldly claimed that Kendrick Lamar does not even deserve to be considered among the top 20 rappers of all time, a statement that has since ignited fierce debates across social media, radio, talk shows, and hip-hop discussion forums. What makes this assertion so explosive is not merely the fact that it questions Kendrick's greatness, but that it comes from someone who isn't even an active rapper. Spears is best known for his work in comedy, particularly on the sketch series Mad TV, where his sharp wit and uncanny celebrity impressions made him a standout performer. Over the years, however, Spears has also proven himself to be an unfiltered voice when it comes to cultural commentary, often dipping into topics like race, politics, and, yes, hip-hop. His perspective carries the weight of someone who grew up in the so-called golden age of rap, a time when lyrical competition was fierce. Albums were dissected line by line, and reputations were built on skill and consistency rather than social media hype. In the interview that sparked this controversy, Spears was measured yet firm. He acknowledged Kendrick's talent, but dismissed the idea that Lamar should be placed among the greatest of all time. For Spears, the conversation about the top 20 rappers must include not only technical skill, but also longevity, influence, and the ability to thrive in an environment filled with equally formidable competition. He compared Kendrick's career to that of hip-hop legends like Nas, Jay-Z, Rakim, Tupac Shakur, and the Notorious B.I.G., suggesting that these artists' contributions to the culture far outweigh what Kendrick has achieved so far. The implication was clear. Spears believes Kendrick is a star, perhaps even a once-in-a-generation talent. But his place in the hierarchy of rap history has yet to be earned. Of course, this opinion struck a nerve. Within hours of the interview being shared online, Twitter was ablaze with passionate defenses of Kendrick's artistry. Fans flooded comment sections with praise for Lamar's discography, pointing out that every one of his major releases has been critically acclaimed. They noted that his Pulitzer Prize win for the album DAMN was a historic moment, marking the first time a rapper had ever been awarded the prestigious honor. Others cited his impact on social issues, with songs like All Right becoming anthems for the Black Lives Matter movement, and his ability to address themes of systemic racism, identity, and personal struggle with both nuance and accessibility. Yet, Spears' critics weren't the only ones speaking up. There was also a significant number of hip-hop fans and commentators who agreed with his assessment, albeit with varying degrees of enthusiasm. Some argued that Kendrick's career, while stellar, is still relatively young compared to the decades-long dominance of the old guard. They pointed out that artists like Jay-Z and Nas not only produced multiple classic albums, but also remained relevant for over 20 years, adapting to the changing sound of hip-hop without compromising their lyrical integrity. From this perspective, Kendrick's current body of work, impressive though it may be, simply hasn't stood the test of time in the way that the greats' catalogs have. This tension between recognizing present-day excellence and respecting the long arc of history is at the heart of the Spears-Lamar debate. It's a clash of eras, one side arguing that the standards of greatness must evolve alongside the art form, and the other insisting that the benchmarks set by past legends remain the gold standard. For those in the former camp, Kendrick represents the best of what modern hip-hop has to offer: introspective, socially aware, and willing to experiment with sound and form. For those in the latter, he is a talented player in a weaker, competitive field, benefiting from an era in which the barriers to entry are lower, the audience more fragmented, and the metrics of success more tied to streaming numbers and viral moments than to the grueling proving grounds of lyrical battles and live performances. But to understand why Spears' comments resonate with some and enrage others, one must take a closer look at his own background and the era that shaped his tastes. Growing up during the late 1980s and early 1990s, Spears witnessed firsthand the explosion of hip-hop as a dominant cultural force. This was the time when Public Enemy was delivering politically charged manifestos. NWA was giving voice to the raw realities of inner-city life, and acts like De La Soul and A Tribe Called Quest were redefining what rap could sound like. For Spears, these years were defined by an unrelenting standard of lyrical craftsmanship and authenticity. The MCs of that era weren't just entertainers. They were poets, journalists, and street philosophers, each battling to outdo the others in complexity, wit, and truth-telling. In that crucible, greatness was forged not only through talent, but through the ability to survive and thrive in a landscape crowded with heavy hitters. Kendrick, by contrast, rose to prominence in a very different environment. Born in 1987 in Compton, California, he came of age in the post-gangster rap era, at a time when the West Coast sound was evolving and fragmenting. His early influences included not only West Coast legends like Dr. Dre and Tupac, but also the East Coast lyricists whose dense wordplay and intricate rhyme schemes set the bar for verbal dexterity. By the time Kendrick released his first major project, Section 80, in 2011, the hip-hop world had changed dramatically. The internet had become the primary platform for discovery. Mixtapes could go viral overnight, and artists no longer relied solely on radio play or a major label backing to reach an audience. Kendrick's rise was meteoric, fueled by both his undeniable skill and his ability to navigate the digital age. Kendrick's breakthrough moment came with the release of Good Kid, Mad City in 2012, an album that was both a coming-of-age story and a cinematic portrait of life in Compton. It wasn't just an album. It was a fully realized narrative filled with characters, plot twists, and recurring motifs. Tracks like Sing About Me I'm Dying of Thirst displayed his ability to weave multiple perspectives into a single song, while Backseat Freestyle showcased his raw, youthful energy and playful braggadocio. The album was lauded as a modern classic, and it catapulted Kendrick into the mainstream. Yet, for critics like Aries Spears, this was still the beginning, a strong opening chapter, but not yet the body of work that cements a place in the all-time rankings. Following the success of Good Kid, Kendrick faced the challenge that every great artist eventually encounters: how to evolve without losing the core of what made him unique. His answer came in 2015 with Pimp a Butterfly, an ambitious, genre-blending project that fused jazz, funk, spoken word, and politically charged lyricism. Songs like The Blacker, The Berry, and All Right became rallying cries in the midst of growing social unrest, while How Much a Dollar Cost offered a parable-like exploration of morality, poverty, and empathy. The album was not just critically acclaimed, it was studied, dissected, and discussed as if it were a landmark piece of literature. In this moment, many fans and critics felt Kendrick had achieved something that transcended hip-hop, placing him in the company of cultural icons whose art spoke to the deepest parts of the human condition. However, for Spears and others who share his viewpoint, these achievements, while impressive, still needed Doe Be Me against the broader history of rap. The argument wasn't that Kendrick lacked talent or artistic vision, far from it. Rather, it was that his reign had not yet faced the kind of prolonged competitive heat that earlier generations endured. In the 1990s, for instance, Nas released Illmatic and then immediately had to prove himself against heavyweight follow-ups from Biggie, Jay-Z, Wu-Tang Clan, and countless others. Every year seemed to bring another contender for the throne, and staying on top meant surviving a constant lyrical arms race. Spears' contention was that Kendrick's era, while not devoid of talent, did not produce the same level of sustained high-stakes rivalry. By 2017, Kendrick had released Damn, an album that was both commercially successful and critically celebrated. The record balanced radio-friendly hits like Humble with more introspective tracks such as Fear and Duckworth. The latter track, in particular, revealed a stunning true story about how a chance act of mercy had changed the trajectory of Kendrick's life. Damn earned Kendrick the Pulitzer Prize for Music, a groundbreaking achievement that further solidified his place in the cultural conversation. For many, this was irrefutable proof of his genius. Yet, in Spears' view, awards and accolades, while important, should not be the sole determinants of greatness. He pointed to the fact that many legendary MCs never won such honors. Yet their influence is undeniable and enduring. The debate over Kendrick's place in the top 20 has also highlighted a generational divide in how hip-hop greatness is measured. For younger fans, streaming numbers, cultural impact, and the ability to spark conversations on social media are as valid as traditional measures like album sales and battle rap victories. Older fans, however, often emphasize technical skill, lyrical depth, and consistency over decades. This divide is not unique to hip-hop. It's present in nearly every art form where new innovators challenge the standards set by their predecessors. But in hip-hop, where authenticity and legacy are intertwined, the stakes feel higher. Spears' critique struck at the heart of this tension, forcing fans to articulate what, exactly, makes an artist one of the greatest of all time. As the conversation unfolded online, it became clear that much of the disagreement stemmed from differing definitions of greatness. For some, greatness is about pushing the boundaries of the art form, breaking new ground, and influencing the next generation of artists. By this metric, Kendrick's experimentation with sound and his thematic ambition place him squarely in the upper echelon. For others, greatness is about a combination of skill, influence, and dominance over a sustained period, a marathon, not a sprint. Spears falls into the latter camp, arguing that until Kendrick's career has been tested over decades, his place in the top 20 should remain provisional. Adding another layer to the debate is the question of competition. Spears has hinted that the current rap landscape lacks the density of high-level lyricists that defined previous eras. While today's artists face their own challenges, from navigating the constant churn of social media to maintaining relevance in an oversaturated market, the nature of competition has changed. In the 90s, an MC's reputation could be made or broken in a single freestyle battle or guest verse. Now, with the industry's focus on viral moments and streaming playlists, the pathways to success are more varied, but arguably less grueling in the traditional sense. Spears' point is that Kendrick has not had to fight tooth and nail against a field of equally skilled contemporaries year after year, and that this difference matters when assessing his legacy. None of this is to say that Spears is dismissing Kendrick outright. Fact, he has been careful to praise Lamar's skill, creativity, and impact. His critique is more about timing and perspective, a reminder that history often looks different in hindsight. An artist who seems untouchable in their prime may be reassessed years later as the cultural context shifts and new talents emerge. Conversely, some artists only gain the recognition they deserve long after their peak. Spears' call for patience is, in a sense, an acknowledgement of the unpredictable nature of legacy. Greatness, he suggests, is not a crown to be worn in the moment, but a title that is earned and reaffirmed over time. This debate shows no signs of fading anytime soon. As Kendrick continues to release new music and expand his creative endeavors, from film projects to collaborations with other artists, the question of his place in hip-hop history will remain a live one. And as long as figures like Aries Spears are willing to voice dissenting opinions, fans will have reason to re-examine their own criteria for greatness. In the end, perhaps the most important takeaway from this exchange is that hip-hop, as an art form, thrives on debate. It is built on the clash of ideas, the push and pull between innovation and tradition, and the never-ending conversation about who truly deserves to be called the greatest. The tension between old-school sensibilities and new-school innovation has always been a driving force in hip-hop. Long before Kendrick Lamar emerged on the scene, the genre was defined by a constant passing of the torch, each generation both honoring and challenging the one before it. In the late 80s and early 90s, MCs like Rakim, KRS-One, and Big Daddy Kane pushed lyrical boundaries that seemed almost untouchable at the time. Then came the mid-to-late 90s wave, where Tupac and Biggie elevated storytelling and charisma into cultural phenomena, while Nas and Jay-Z sharpened lyricism into an art form of its own. Every new king faced challengers, and every era had its defining clashes, from the East Coast versus West Coast rivalry to localized battles that, while smaller in scope, were equally intense for those involved. When Aries Spears questions Kendrick's placement among the top 20, he's tapping into this very tradition of comparison. Spears grew up in a period where hip-hop was raw, less polished, and arguably more competitive on a day-to-day basis. Battles weren't always about album releases. They happened on street corners, in ciphers, and during impromptu radio freestyles. The stakes were immediate and personal. You could lose your credibility in a single verse if you slipped. Spears' point is not that Kendrick wouldn't survive in that environment. In fact, he concedes Lamar's technical brilliance, but rather that Kendrick hasn't had to survive that environment. The difference, to Spears, is like comparing a decorated general who has won decisive battles to one who has spent their career in a different kind of warfare altogether. Both can be great, but the experiences are not interchangeable. What makes Kendrick's journey unique is how he has navigated a very different set of challenges. In an era where attention spans are shorter and musical trends shift faster than ever, staying relevant is no small feat. Kendrick has managed to do so without bending entirely to commercial pressures. While many artists chase the latest TikTok trend or craft songs designed to go viral, Lamar has doubled down on conceptual albums that reward deep listening. A move that risks alienating casual listeners but has strengthened his bond with serious fans. His choice to prioritize artistry over algorithm-friendly output is itself a form of resistance, though it is a quieter, more cerebral kind than the verbal duels of hip-hop's earlier days. Still, Spears' critique resonates with those who feel that competition is the crucible in which true legends are forged. They point to Jay-Z's decades-long consistency, Eminem's run of dominance in the late 90s and early 2000s, and LL Cool J's ability to reinvent himself across multiple generations. These artists not only set the bar, but defended it relentlessly against a constant wave of challengers. Spears' argument is that Kendrick, brilliant though he is, has not yet been forced into the same kind of sustained, high-pressure rivalry. His main peers, artists like J. Cole and Drake, operate in lanes that sometimes intersect but rarely spark direct lyrical combat. The few times Kendrick has dipped into more competitive waters, as with his verse on Control, the results have been electrifying. For Spears, those flashes of aggression only reinforce the idea that more of it could solidify Kendrick's place among the greats. The discussion also touches on another fault line in hip-hop: the role of cultural impact versus technical mastery. Kendrick's music has undeniably shaped conversations about race, identity, and social justice, particularly in the United States. All Right became an unofficial anthem for the Black Lives Matter movement, and his work is often dissected in academic settings alongside classic literature. For some, this level of cultural influence outweighs the need for constant lyrical sparring. They argue that moving the culture forward, inspiring real-world change, and influencing the collective consciousness is itself a measure of greatness. Spears doesn't dismiss this, but he warns against letting cultural relevance alone serve as the deciding factor. In his view, an artist's influence must be matched by their ability to dominate on the mic, track after track, year after year. Interestingly, this mirrors debates in other art forms and sports. In basketball, for example, fans argue about whether a player's peak performance for a short period can outweigh a slightly lower but longer-lasting career. Is a few years of unmatched dominance enough to rank above decades of consistent excellence? Hip-hop faces the same question. Kendrick's peak moments, whether it's the intricate wordplay of Mortal Man or the layered storytelling in Duckworth, are as good as anything the genre has produced. But Spears' insistence on the marathon test reflects an old-school mindset. The idea that greatness isn't about hitting the highest note once, but about holding it for as long as possible. This generational clash plays out in the way fans consume and discuss music today. Social media accelerates every conversation, turning album releases into instant cultural events and reducing debates that once played out over months or years into 48-hour news cycles. In this climate, Kendrick's deliberate pace sometimes taking years between projects can feel both refreshing and frustrating. His fans see it as a sign of careful artistry, while critics argue it limits his exposure to the constant pressure that sharpens an MC's skills. Spears' comments tap into this impatience, questioning whether an artist who releases so sparingly can truly be measured against those who fought to stay relevant year after year in the pre-streaming era, where the conversation gets even more complex is in how hip-hop's definition of competition has evolved. Today, an artist's biggest rival might not even be another rapper, but the algorithm itself. Streaming platforms reward frequency and familiarity, often pushing artists toward shorter, catchier songs designed to be played on repeat. Kendrick's resistance to this trend is admirable, but it also means he's playing a different game. Spears' challenge is, in part, about whether greatness can be fully recognized when the rules of the game have changed so drastically. Can we fairly compare artists across such different eras, or do we need separate categories altogether? In the end, Spears' critique might serve Kendrick better than blind praise ever could. By holding him to the highest standard, Spears forces a deeper examination of what makes an MC truly legendary. Kendrick's supporters are quick to counter every point, citing his flawless discography, his innovation, and his ability to inspire both fans and fellow artists. But even they acknowledge that his story is still being written. For now, the debate itself, passionate, informed, and unrelenting, is proof that Kendrick Lamar has already achieved something rare. He has become a central figure in hip-hop's ongoing conversation about its own legacy, ChatGPT said. The story of To Pimp a Butterfly doesn't just start with its first track. It begins in the echoes of a cultural moment that demanded both introspection and action. By the time Kendrick Lamar began crafting the album, he had already established himself as a formidable MC through Good Kid, Mad City, a record that combined autobiographical detail with cinematic storytelling. But To Pimp a Butterfly was an entirely different beast, not merely a personal album, but an ambitious manifesto about the Black experience in America, artistic identity, and the pressures of fame. The opening track, Wesley's Theory, sets the stage with an almost jarring mix of funk and spoken word. George Clinton's presence is no accident. He represents the lineage of Black music that Kendrick is both inheriting and reshaping. Thundercat's bassline slides in like a sly grin, playful yet dangerous, while Kendrick's lyrics immediately juxtapose ambition with warning. The song takes inspiration from actor Wesley Snipes' infamous tax troubles, using them as a metaphor for how quickly the system can swallow Black entertainers who rise too fast without a safety net. This is Kendrick laying out the stakes before the game even begins. From there, for free. Interlude hits like a jolt, a rapid-fire, jazz-inflected spoken word piece that blurs the line between satire and anger. Kendrick's delivery is theatrical, almost comedic. Yet the underlying message is razor-sharp. America has commodified Black art and identity to the point where even success feels like a kind of servitude. The way the horns and drums play against. His voice is deliberate, chaotic, freeform, but always moving forward. It's the sound of frustration refusing to be neatly contained. Then comes King Kunta, arguably the album's most accessible track, but also one of its most layered. On the surface, it's a boastful declaration of dominance, drawing parallels between Kendrick and Kunta Kinte, the enslaved African made famous through roots. But underneath, it's about agency, about refusing to let the industry dictate terms, about acknowledging the power and weight of ancestry. The tracks bounce an infectious hook mask just how politically charged the lyrics really are. What's remarkable about To Pimp a Butterfly is how it never loses sight of its thematic through line, even as it shifts sonically. Institutionalized in these walls. Both tackle the mental and emotional structures that keep people trapped, sometimes by the system, sometimes by their own decisions. The production, rich with live instrumentation, feels organic and breathing, a deliberate rejection of the overly polished, electronic-heavy trends dominating mainstream rap at the time. It's as if Kendrick is saying, "This is music for the mind and spirit, not just the club or the charts." And then, almost halfway through, comes All Right, the album's rallying cry. Pharrell's production is deceptively buoyant. Its sing-along chorus carrying a promise of resilience that became an anthem for protest movements across the country. When crowds chanted "We gon' be all right" during demonstrations, it was more than just a song lyric. It was a survival mantra. Kendrick's verses acknowledge the weight of systemic oppression, personal doubt, and community struggle. But the chorus lifts everything skyward. It's this tension between despair and hope that defines much of Kendrick's work. The later tracks, like The Blacker, The Berry, and Mortal Man, push the album's political and philosophical ambitions even further. The Blacker, The Berry is unapologetically confrontational, with Kendrick delivering some of his most aggressive verses over a hard-hitting beat. It's an unflinching look at racial identity, hypocrisy, and self-reflection. And then, Mortal Man closes the record with a surreal twist, an imagined conversation with Tupac Shakur, pieced together from archival interviews. Here, Kendrick is not just making music, he's situating himself within hip-hop's lineage, grappling with the responsibility that comes with influence. What makes To Pimp a Butterfly essential to understanding the Aries Spears debate is that it embodies both the old-school value of thematic depth and the new-school focus on album-mastered piece. Spears' critique about competition misses the fact that Kendrick's battles often aren't with other rappers, but with societal structures, personal demons, and historical narratives. This is a different kind of warfare, one fought with metaphor and concept rather than diss tracks. The rain had slowed to a gentle mist by the time Kendrick stepped away from the microphone for the final time that night. The studio's warm glow spilled over the boards, catching the faint curls of steam from a cup of untouched coffee, now cold. Around him, the room was silent, not the awkward silence of uncertainty, but the heavy quiet of something complete. Somewhere in the deep hum of the city, the very people he had been speaking to and speaking for were moving through their lives. Some were driving home from late shifts, some were sitting on apartment stoops, heads nodding to beats from a Bluetooth speaker. Others were marching in streets lit by flashing lights and cell phone screens, their voices joining together in chants that carried the same heartbeat as his verses. Kendrick knew that what he had made would not please everyone. That was never the point. His rhymes were not built to sit safely on playlists between party anthems. They were built to make you sit up, to make you argue, to make you uncomfortable enough to question. And in that discomfort, maybe, to move. Outside the studio, the mist thickened into a low fog, swallowing the neon in soft flows. Somewhere in a comedy club across town, Aries Spears might still be holding court, tossing opinions into the air like darts, his words sparking conversations in bars and group chats. That, too, was part of the culture, the debates, the clashes. The way iron sharpened iron. In the end, hip-hop was never just about beats or rhymes. It was about the ongoing story, written in every verse, every cipher, every argument that spilled past midnight. And as Kendrick walked out into the damp night, he pulled tight against the chill. He understood something Aries might not yet see. The greatest battles were not always fought on the mic against another rapper. Sometimes they were fought against the silence, against forgetting, against the weight of history itself. Somewhere in the distance, a car stereo rattled with bass. A familiar hook floated through the fog, and strangers' voices rose with it, defiant and unbroken. We gonna be alright. And just like that, the city exhaled. The beat rolled on, ChatGPT said. The debate goes on, but one thing is for sure, hip-hop will always have different opinions and passionate fans. Whether you agree with Aries Spears or stand with Kendrick Lamar, the music keeps moving forward. Thanks for watching my channel, Mighty X.